Emily had been wiping tables at the small downtown cafe for what felt like an eternity. The smell of freshly ground coffee beans, the sharp tang of steamed milk, and the sweet scent of pastries had become the background of her life, a constant presence that she neither fully appreciated nor particularly loved. She moved mechanically, her movements precise and practiced, as if the rhythm of her work had seeped into her very bones. 5 years. 5 long years of early mornings, long evenings, and weekends lost to clinking cups, ringing cash registers, and the endless murmur of customers. It was a Tuesday morning. One of those ordinary days, where the sun peeked lazily over the buildings across the street, painting the city in golden streaks that bounced off the glass windows of passing cars. Emily had long since stopped noticing the beauty of it, focusing instead on making sure every cup of coffee was perfect, every plate of croissants neat and appealing. She had learned to survive in this small world with quiet diligence, never expecting anything extraordinary, never imagining that life might offer a moment that would break through the monotony and rearrange everything she thought she knew about the world and about herself. And then he walked in. He was impossible to miss. Not because he was loud or demanding. He wasn't. But because he carried himself with a presence that seemed to bend the attention of the room toward him without a word. The cafe, which had been buzzing with low conversations and the gentle clatter of utensils, seemed to dim around him, as if the light itself had shifted to make him the center. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that seemed to belong to a world Emily had only glimpsed in magazines or through the occasional television feature. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, the kind of shoes that whispered wealth without announcing it, and the faint scent of expensive cologne trailed in his wake like a signature. Emily paused mid-swipe on a table, her cloth resting in her hand. She had served countless customers over the years, people who left her unnoticed, people who tossed a coin or a tip and moved on, unaware of the human who had handed them their latte or their muffin. But this man, he was different. There was a calm authority about him, the kind that didn't shout or demand, but simply existed, and in his existence, he reshaped the energy around him. He approached the counter with deliberate ease, glancing around as if he were weighing every choice in the room. When he finally spoke, his voice was smooth, measured, and low, carrying an unspoken certainty. A cup of tea, black, no sugar, and a slice of your pecan pie. Emily blinked. Ordinary order, yes. But she couldn't shake the sense that this order had weight, that it was an anchor for something larger, something she didn't yet understand. She nodded, stepping forward to take his order, but then her eyes caught it. The ring. It was delicate, gold, and intricately engraved, a pattern so fine that it seemed almost impossible to have survived the decades without losing its detail. Her heart stopped. The sudden pounding in her chest made her hands tremble slightly as she adjusted the tray she had been preparing. She had thought that ring was lost forever, thought that the small, treasured piece of her mother's life had vanished when the chaos of grief and circumstance had swept through her childhood. She had pictured it sitting in some forgotten drawer, or worse, melted down into something unrecognizable. And here it was, gleaming on the finger of this stranger in a cafe she had walked past every day without noticing. "Excuse me," she said, her voice catching. She cleared her throat, trying again, softer this time. "That ring, it was my mother's." For a moment, he didn't respond. He simply looked at her, and she felt as if he were peeling away layers of her soul with his gaze. There was surprise there, yes, but there was also recognition, something that made her pulse quicken in a way she hadn't felt since she was a child. Then, almost gently, he lifted his hand and extended it toward her. "Tell me about it," he said. Emily hesitated. as if speaking might shatter the fragile thread, connecting her past and this surreal present. But the words began to flow before she could stop them, carried by memories she had kept tucked away in the quiet corners of her mind. She spoke of her mother, of the way the ring had been passed down through generations, how it had been worn every day, and how, when her mother passed away, the ring had disappeared from her life like a ghost. She told him about her childhood, the small apartment she had grown up in, the evenings spent listening to her mother hum softly, while she braided Emily's hair. The ring had been a symbol of love, a tangible piece of history that tied her to her roots, to her family, to the warmth of a home that had faded into memory. Emily's voice shook, and for a brief moment, she was not a waitress taking orders and wiping tables. She was a daughter remembering, honoring, mourning. The man listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't glance at his phone or check the time. He simply listened, leaning slightly forward, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that was almost unnerving. Emily found herself staring at him too, trying to decipher who he was, why he cared so much about a simple piece of jewelry. There was a story in his gaze, a story she couldn't yet understand, but that seemed intertwined with her own. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he spoke, his voice low and calm, yet carrying a weight that made the room feel impossibly still. "I think you're the only one who can help me understand its history," he said. Emily blinked, unsure whether to laugh or cry. She had expected disbelief, perhaps a polite nod and then a change of subject. But this was different. This man, who could have been anyone, a stranger, who had entered her life in a swirl of polished shoes and quiet authority, had made a statement that shattered the ordinary world she had inhabited. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously, curiosity laced with caution. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a small leather-bound folder. With a careful hand, he opened it to reveal photographs, yellowed with age, of people she didn't recognize at first, until she saw the ring on their fingers. Not just any ring, but the same delicate, engraved gold band she had been speaking of, only worn decades ago by women she had never met. The images were formal, almost stiff, yet each one carried a weight of pride and history that made Emily's chest tighten. "This ring," he said, tracing a finger over one photograph, "has a story that stretches far beyond your mother. It belonged to families, to generations who preserved something extraordinary. And now through you, I believe we can uncover its true journey." Emily's mind reeled. Her mother's ring was not just a memory. It was a thread in a tapestry she hadn't known existed. She felt the familiar tug of fear, the instinct to retreat, to protect what was hers in the safest way she knew. But beneath that fear was a spark of something else. Excitement, curiosity, an almost reckless willingness to see where this moment might lead. She looked at him, really looked, and saw something she hadn't expected: vulnerability. Despite his polished exterior, there was a subtle tension in his posture, a hint that he too had been searching, waiting, hoping. And in that instant, Emily realized that the ring was more than an object. It was a bridge between past and present, between strangers who were somehow connected, between the life she had been living in a world she had never dared to imagine. "I don't know if I can help," she said softly, unsure whether she truly wanted to admit her curiosity. "I mean, it's just a ring, right?" He smiled, a small, almost imperceptible curl of his lips that made the tension in the room ease slightly. "It's never just a ring," he said. "And somehow, I think you know that better than anyone." Emily felt her hands shake slightly as she reached for the ring, tracing its familiar grooves and patterns with reverence. Memories flooded back, not just of her mother, but of herself, of the little girl who had once believed in magic, in stories, in the possibility that something small could change everything. She looked up at him, and for the first time, really saw him. Not as a stranger, not as a man in a suit, but as a keeper of stories, a seeker of truths, someone whose life had intersected with hers in the most extraordinary of coincidences. And in that moment, Emily understood something she hadn't realized in years: her ordinary life, her routine, her quiet existence behind the counter at a small cafe was about to change forever. The man closed the folder and handed it to her. "If you're willing," he said, "I would like you to come with me, to help me uncover what has been lost, to preserve what should never be forgotten, and in the process, perhaps, discover a part of yourself you didn't know existed." Emily took a deep breath, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear, hope and disbelief. She looked at the ring, at the photographs, at the man who seemed to carry the weight of decades in his gaze. And then she nodded, a simple movement that carried the weight of a decision that would forever alter the course of her life. For the first time in years, Emily felt truly awake. And as the cafe buzzed quietly around them, oblivious to the monumental moment that had just unfolded, Emily realized that her story, and her mother's story, was only just beginning. Emily couldn't sleep that night. The events at the cafe replayed in her mind over and over the moment she had seen the ring, the photos in the leather folder, and the man, Alexander Blackwood, who had somehow known more about her mother's life than she ever had. It was surreal, almost dreamlike. She had gone to bed exhausted, yet her mind refused rest. Instead, it wandered through possibilities she had never considered: who he really was, why her mother's ring had ended up in his possession, and why now, after so many years, fate had placed them in the same small cafe. By morning, Emily felt a strange sense of anticipation. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple blouse and slacks, as if she were preparing herself for a world far beyond the cozy, familiar walls of her cafe. When she arrived at Alexander's office building, the glass towers reflected the morning sun in shards of brilliance, and she realized with a mix of awe and anxiety that she had never entered a place like this before. This was a world of precision and power, of wealth she had only glimpsed from a distance. And yet, she was here now, stepping into it because of a ring and the memory of her mother. Alexander greeted her in the lobby, his presence commanding yet calm. "I'm glad you came," he said, his tone almost warm, though the stiffness of his tailored suit reminded her that he was a man used to control and order. He led her through a series of elevators and corridors, each step deeper into his world, until they arrived at an office unlike any she had ever seen. The room was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline, shelves lined with rare books, artifacts, and meticulously labeled boxes stretched along the walls. In the center, a large desk of dark mahogany held a neat stack of documents, a laptop, and several open folders that hinted at the painstaking work Alexander had been conducting. The entire office had the air of a museum and a laboratory combined, a space where history was not merely preserved, but actively pursued and understood. Emily couldn't help but feel small in the grandness of it all, yet a spark of curiosity flickered in her chest. Alexander gestured to a chair across from him. "Please, sit. I want to explain why I brought you here." She obeyed, though her hands fidgeted slightly in her lap. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze sharp, intelligent, yet not unkind. "The ring you spoke of yesterday," he began, "was once part of a collection that belonged to a family of great historical significance. It disappeared decades ago under circumstances no one could fully explain. For years, I've searched for it, following clues, examining archives, and speaking to experts. And now it's here, in your possession." Emily swallowed hard. "I don't understand. How do you know so much about it?" He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Because I have spent my life uncovering lost histories. I am a collector, yes, but not just of objects. I collect stories, the legacies that objects carry. Every artifact tells a story, and this ring, your mother preserved something extraordinary by keeping it. Her mind spun. The ring had been a symbol of love, of family, of personal memory, but she had never considered it part of a larger, historical legacy. Suddenly, the small keepsake she had treasured in private seemed to hold significance she had never imagined. I can't sell it, she said softly, the words almost a whisper. It belonged to my mother. I can't just give it away. Alexander nodded, as if he had anticipated her answer. I'm not asking you to sell it. I'm asking you to help me understand it. Its journey. Its significance. Your mother may have been the last in its line of keepers, but you, Emily, are now part of its story. I believe that together, we can uncover its full history and preserve it for the future. She hesitated, fear and excitement mingling in her chest. Part of her wanted to retreat, to return to the safety of her cafe, to forget this strange encounter. But another part, an inner voice she hadn't listened to in years, urged her to step forward. This was an opportunity she couldn't ignore. How would I help you? She asked cautiously. Alexander's eyes glinted with a hint of admiration. By sharing what you know. By helping me research its past. By uncovering the connections your mother maintained and the secrets she preserved. You understand its significance on a personal level in a way no historian or collector could. That perspective is invaluable. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Emily nodded slowly, feeling a shiver of anticipation run through her. This was more than a job, more than a project. This was a chance to step into a world she had never known, to uncover stories lost to time, and perhaps, to discover something about herself in the process. Over the next few hours, Alexander guided her through his collection. He showed her letters, photographs, and meticulously cataloged objects, each one carrying layers of history and meaning. Emily realized that her mother had been part of something larger than she had ever imagined. A network of guardians, keepers of legacies and memories, entrusted with preserving history in its most intimate form. One photograph caught her attention immediately. It depicted a woman in an elegant dress, standing beside a grand piano, her hand adorned with the ring she now wore. Emily gasped. The resemblance was uncanny, but it wasn't her mother. Alexander saw the reaction and nodded. This woman, he explained, was part of the original family that commissioned the ring. Your mother was entrusted with it many years later, preserving the legacy when the family line had dispersed. She protected it, Emily, and that's why it resurfaced with you. You are now part of that lineage of guardians. Emily felt a mixture of pride and disbelief. Her life had been ordinary, predictable, constrained by bills and routine, yet this object, this small piece of gold, had connected her to something extraordinary. Her mother's care and foresight had placed her in this moment, guiding her into a world she never thought she would enter. Over the following days, Emily worked closely with Alexander. She combed through documents, deciphered handwriting from decades ago, and helped identify artifacts that had once belonged to the same lineage. Each discovery was a revelation, uncovering not just historical significance but personal stories. Lives intertwined with triumphs and tragedies, loves and losses, all anchored by objects that had survived the passage of time. Emily found herself growing more confident in her role. She began to see patterns others missed, connections hidden in plain sight, and insights into the human stories behind the objects. Alexander noticed her aptitude and often paused in admiration. You have a rare eye for history, he said one afternoon, his tone almost reverent. And an instinct for the stories that matter most. Their collaboration soon extended beyond research. Alexander invited Emily to attend private viewings, exhibitions, and even small gatherings of historians and collectors. At first, she had been intimidated, feeling out of place in the world of tailored suits, polished shoes, and elegant accents. But she learned quickly, her natural curiosity and sincerity earning the respect of those around her. She realized that this was not just about artifacts. It was about people, connections, and the preservation of lives that would otherwise be forgotten. One evening, after a long day of sorting through letters and photographs, Emily and Alexander sat together in the office, reviewing a ledger that detailed the original ownership of the ring and related artifacts. The room was quiet except for the occasional scratch of pen on paper and the soft hum of the city below. Emily felt a profound sense of connection, not only to her mother, but to the generations of people who had come before her, who had entrusted their memories and legacies to objects like this ring. "Your mother knew more than you realize," Alexander said quietly, almost to himself. She wasn't just preserving a ring, she was protecting a history that many tried to erase or forget. Emily looked at him, absorbing the weight of his words. "I never thought of it that way," she admitted. "I just thought it was a piece of my mother." He smiled faintly. "And that is why you are the perfect person to continue her work. You understand its meaning, its emotional weight, in a way no one else could. That understanding is priceless." For the first time in her life, Emily felt truly seen, not as a waitress, not as a young woman struggling to make ends meet, but as someone capable of preserving history, of uncovering truths, of making a difference. The responsibility was daunting, but it was also exhilarating. As the days turned into weeks, Emily's bond with Alexander deepened. They worked side by side, discussing findings, theorizing about missing pieces, and connecting threads that had been severed by time. Their conversations were long and intense, filled with laughter, debate, and occasional moments of silent reflection. Emily discovered that Alexander, despite his wealth and power, carried a quiet vulnerability, a relentless drive to understand, to preserve, and to connect with something real in a world often obsessed with superficiality. Through it all, the ring remained a constant reminder of her mother's legacy and the extraordinary path her life had taken. What had started as a simple shift at a cafe had blossomed into a journey into history, mystery, and self-discovery. Emily realized that she was no longer the person who had wiped tables and served coffee. She had become a guardian of stories, a keeper of legacies, and a participant in a narrative far larger than herself. And as she looked at Alexander across the office one evening, the city lights twinkling behind him, Emily understood that her life had changed irrevocably. The ring had connected her to her mother, to history, and to a man who believed in the power of stories as much as she did. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of purpose that went beyond survival. A purpose that could shape not only her life, but the lives of generations yet to come. Weeks passed, each day drawing Emily deeper into a world she had never imagined. She had grown comfortable in Alexander's office, navigating through the mountains of letters, photographs, and artifacts with a confidence that surprised even her. What had begun as curiosity had blossomed into a calling. She could feel it in the rhythm of her days. The careful cataloging of items, the delicate examination of old papers, the subtle uncovering of connections that had eluded even seasoned historians. Every object told a story, and Emily had become fluent in the silent language of the past. Alexander and Emily had formed a rhythm, a partnership that was professional yet tinged with subtle, unspoken understanding. They shared ideas, debated theories, and sometimes just sat in quiet reflection, letting the weight of history hang between them. Despite the grandeur of his office and the formality of his demeanor, Alexander revealed glimpses of something more human: curiosity, admiration, even vulnerability. Emily found herself noticing the little things, the way he frowned slightly when puzzled, the subtle intensity in his gaze when he was engrossed in a document, the almost imperceptible smile that touched his lips when she discovered a missing link in the historical records. One evening, as the city lights twinkled like scattered jewels below their high-rise office, Emily was reviewing a series of old ledger entries. Her mother's handwriting leapt off the pages, delicate yet precise, marking transactions and notations that had once seemed mundane, but now revealed layers of intention and care. She traced the letters with her fingers, feeling a pang of longing for the woman she had loved and lost. Alexander sat across from her, reading over his own stack of documents, yet his attention kept flicking to her. "Your mother," he said softly, almost reverently, "was remarkable. She preserved more than just objects. She preserved legacies, family lines, stories that many thought were lost forever." Emily looked up, her eyes glistening. "I never understood. I thought she was just keeping things safe. But she was protecting history. She was protecting people." He nodded, leaning back in his chair. "Exactly. And now, you're part of that responsibility. The ring isn't just jewelry, it's a key. A key to understanding who your mother was and the network she was connected to." Emily felt a weight settle on her shoulders, a mix of pride and apprehension. The thought that her mother had trusted her, through this small golden ring, to continue a legacy she barely understood, was humbling. She felt the responsibility in every fiber of her being, but alongside it, a spark of determination burned brighter than ever. Their research led them deeper into the history of the ring and the people connected to it. Emily uncovered letters written by her mother to distant relatives, detailing the ring's journey and emphasizing the importance of secrecy and protection. There were photographs of gatherings, ceremonial occasions, and even private moments that revealed the significance of the ring beyond monetary or aesthetic value. Each discovery was a revelation, and each revelation drew Emily closer to understanding not only the object but also her own identity. One night, while going through a particularly fragile journal, Emily stumbled upon a passage that stopped her cold. Her mother had written about a clandestine meeting, a hidden promise made to ensure that certain truths would survive. Emily's heart raced as she read the words, realizing that her mother had been aware of dangers, aware of people who might try to claim the ring for their own purposes. The weight of that knowledge pressed down on her. Her mother had trusted her with something far greater than she had realized. Alexander leaned over her shoulder, reading the same passage. "She was extraordinary," he murmured. "And now, you carry that same responsibility." Emily nodded, swallowing hard. "I feel unprepared. But I can't ignore it. I won't." Over the next few weeks, their investigation took them beyond the office, into archives, private collections, and historical societies. Emily's perspective proved invaluable. Her intuition, shaped by her mother's meticulous notes and her own careful observations, allowed them to uncover details that had been overlooked by more experienced historians. Alexander often paused in admiration. Quietly acknowledging her insight, she began to feel a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. A clarity that this work mattered, that the legacies they were uncovering were more than academic pursuits. As they delved deeper, Emily discovered a connection she hadn't anticipated. The ring was tied not only to her mother's family, but also to Alexander's own lineage. Her mother and Alexander's family had intersected decades earlier, their lives entwined through trust, loyalty, and shared secrets. The realization hit her with a force that left her breathless. This was no coincidence. The meeting at the cafe, the appearance of the ring in her possession, The meticulous efforts of Alexander, all of it was the result of a network that had been orchestrated with precision and care. Alexander noticed the change in her demeanor, the way her eyes lingered on certain documents, the intensity of her focus, the subtle reverence with which she handled each artifact. "You've discovered it, haven't you?" he asked quietly, not demanding an answer but inviting her acknowledgement. Emily met his gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's connected to you, to your family. My mother, she was protecting something important, something that ties us together." He nodded, a mixture of admiration and relief in his eyes. "Yes, and now together, we can ensure it remains protected." Their collaboration became almost inseparable. Days stretched into nights as they pieced together the history of the ring, reconstructing events, tracing lines of correspondence, and identifying key individuals whose lives had been shaped by its presence. Emily found herself immersed in stories of courage, loyalty, betrayal, and love, histories that had been hidden in plain sight for decades. Each revelation deepened her understanding of her mother, of Alexander, and of the intricate web of human connections that spanned generations. One evening, while reviewing an old collection of photographs, Emily noticed something she had overlooked before. There, in a faded image, was her mother standing beside Alexander's father, the ring gleaming on her finger. The scene was ordinary, almost mundane, but the significance was staggering. Her mother had been trusted, not just by her own family, but by Alexander's as well, to safeguard a legacy that transcended generations. Emily felt a surge of emotion, pride, awe, and a profound sense of responsibility. Alexander watched her silently, sensing the depth of her realization. "Your mother understood the importance of continuity," he said softly. "She knew that someone had to carry the story forward. And now, that someone is you." Emily's chest tightened. The enormity of the responsibility was daunting, yet she felt an unexpected surge of confidence. She was no longer just a waitress who had stumbled into an extraordinary moment. She was a guardian of history, a keeper of legacies, and a participant in a narrative that had been carefully preserved through decades of secrecy and care. Their work soon culminated in a moment Emily had never anticipated. Alexander took the ring from the desk and held it in his hands, examining it with reverence. "This belongs to you," he said, placing it gently on her finger. "Not because of ownership, but because you understand its true value. The stories it carries, the lives it touches, the legacy it represents." A tears welled in Emily's eyes. She had expected many things from her journey: knowledge, understanding, even recognition. But this acknowledgement of her mother's trust, her own capability, and the profound significance of the ring was overwhelming. She felt a connection to her mother that was more tangible than ever, a sense of purpose that filled every fiber of her being. In the weeks that followed, Emily and Alexander continued their work, cataloging artifacts, preserving histories, and uncovering stories that had been buried by time. Their partnership deepened, evolving into a profound respect and understanding of one another. Emily admired Alexander's relentless dedication and his ability to see the significance in the smallest details, while he admired her intuition, empathy, and unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth. But their collaboration was not just about artifacts or history. It was about people. Emily began to understand that the legacies they were preserving were not simply objects. They were reflections of lives lived, choices made, and memories cherished. Each artifact was a window into the past, a story waiting to be told, and Emily had become the storyteller her mother had always hoped she would be. One evening, as the city lights shimmered through the office windows, Alexander and Emily reviewed a final set of documents related to the ring's journey. The room was quiet except for the soft rustle of paper and the faint hum of the city below. Emily traced her fingers over her mother's handwriting, feeling a profound sense of connection and continuity. "You've done more than I could have imagined," Alexander said, his voice low and filled with admiration. "You've preserved not just a ring, but a legacy. You've honored your mother, and in doing so, you've ensured that history will remember the people who mattered." Emily looked at him, her eyes glistening. "I couldn't have done it without you," she whispered. "Without your guidance, I would never have understood its true significance." He smiled, a subtle, genuine smile that softened the edges of his otherwise stoic demeanor. "We did it together," he said. "And now, the story continues. With you." Emily felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of completion and possibility intertwined. The journey that had begun with a simple statement, "That ring was my mother's," had transformed her life in ways she had never imagined. She was no longer just a girl wiping tables in a cafe. She was a guardian of stories, a preserver of legacies, and a participant in a narrative that transcended time. And as she gazed at the ring on her finger, glimmering under the soft glow of the office lights, Emily understood that her mother's trust, Alexander's guidance, and her own courage had converged to create something extraordinary. The ring was more than a piece of gold. It was a bridge between past and present, a symbol of legacy, and a testament to the power of human connection. For Emily, life would never be ordinary again. She had stepped into a world of history, mystery, and purpose, and she knew that, together with Alexander, she would continue to uncover the stories that needed to be remembered. The ring had brought them together, but it was the journey, the discoveries, the revelations, the shared moments of awe and understanding that had truly transformed them both. And in that transformation, Emily realized something profound: the past is never truly gone. The stories we inherit shape who we are, and sometimes a single object, small, delicate, and seemingly insignificant, can change the course of a life forever.